Hi, today we are talking about my favorite reads of 2023. And nothing, that's it. That's all we're doing today. There's not that many books. So it's not going to be a super long video like my book videos normally are, but I'll try to talk about them in detail as much as I can. So let's get started. I read a total of 173 books this year so far, but I thought there was going to be a lot more favorites on this list than what there was. I wanted to put my favorite of all the favorites at the top, and that is SoDo is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. One of my favorite things about Taylor's books is the fact they all exist within the same universe and they all exist within LA, and because I grew up in LA and I'm living here, I love reading about it because she always talks about places I've been to and I can envision it because I know where it's at. I don't know, it's so much better when you read a book and you know the location, right? Same with a movie. If you watch a movie and it takes place somewhere you've been, it's so much more exciting, and it's the same thing with books for me. So SoDo is Back is about a tennis player, and I did not think I would enjoy this book as much as I did because I really had no interest in tennis until I read this book. Like after I finished this book, I was like, I kind of want to watch Wimbledon and I kind of want to learn how to play tennis now, which I am currently doing. This book starts out in 1994 when former tennis star SoDo witnesses her record 20 Grand Slam titles shattered. She then comes out of retirement at age 37 to prove that she is the best tennis player in the world. And if you're not into tennis and that synopsis isn't enough for you to get you reading, I promise you will be into tennis after you finish reading this book because it was just that good. You will go through a lot of scenes of her playing tennis, yes, but it's also this whole growing experience and kind of a coming of age story as not old. I don't want to say she's old because I'm close to that age, but a coming of age story at her age, if that makes sense. And if you've read any of Taylor Jenkins Reid's other books, you may have seen Carrie mentioned in Malibu Rising, and you'll also see some of the other characters mentioned in SoDo is Back. And it's so funny when those characters pop up because you're just like, oh my gosh, I know the backstory to this person, and now it's just adding more of a story to that character from another novel. I also just found out this is going to be a film, and I figured it probably would be because it's so good. Yeah, I thought the tennis movie with Zendaya may have been it. It's not it, but it reminded me of it, and I was just like hoping it would be a film, and it's going to be, so can't wait to see that. The next book is The Mary Shelley Club by Goldie Moldavsky. This is a YA thriller, and I've heard people mention this book to me because they said it was DA, but I was like, how is this DA? How does this relate to dark academia? And I finally read it, and holy crap, it is so good. It is so good. I will say, the synopsis is a bit misleading. I mean, up to a certain point, because you think it's about just this one particular club, right? But it goes so much deeper. The author really just killed it. They really killed it, pun intended. So this story follows a high school student named Rachel who is obsessed with horror films due to something that happened in her past. It's like a coping mechanism, and she loves watching horror to kind of numb herself to fear in a way. That's all I'll say. She ends up joining this secret club called the Mary Shelley Club, where students reenact scenes from horror movies as pranks, and they target it towards a specific person to see if they can get them to scream. The people who get scared don't know why this is happening. They don't know it's a bunch of kids planning to do this as a joke. They just think it's actually happening to them. The pranks end up escalating, becoming dangerous to the point of death. And they are now trying to uncover this sinister stalker, and there's just so much more to the story that I can't say anything else. There were some parts of this that felt very YA, but after I finished it, it was a 5-star read for me. The next book is a memoir, and this is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. It was my first time ever reading a story like this. I've read other memoirs before, but it was about like one specific journey a person went on, as opposed to this was her life, and it was really heartbreaking, but it was also written in a way that made it not so serious. It was kind of like funny at moments in the way that she wrote it, and made you feel like she had an understanding that the things that happened to her wasn't her fault. Like she could kind of poke fun at it at this point. Obviously, she touched up on some very intense things that covered very intense topics, but it was just written so well. This story was so crazy, it felt like it was fiction. I could not believe it was real. You cannot make this stuff up. And this book is actually what got me into more memoirs, just because I loved it so much. And it's really interesting to read about other people's stories because you never know what's going on behind closed doors. I just can't believe she disclosed as much information as she did. The next book is The Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. The first 2 books for me were a 5-star read. The third book, Specials, I was very unhappy and disappointed with the ending. So we're not even gonna talk about that one. But the first 2 books were so good. I cannot believe it took me this long to read this book. I didn't even know about this book until recently. I'm happy I found it. If you haven't read it, read it. But this story is about a futuristic society where everyone undergoes plastic surgery at age 16 to become beautiful. Like you can have anything done. And in this story, we follow Tally Youngblood, who is super excited to undergo her procedure. She's been living in the ugly town of this city where, you know, you can only live if you're ugly. And then once you get pretty and you turn pretty, you can move over to Pretty Town with all of the pretty people, and you can attend like these lavish events and you do fun things all the time because you're beautiful and you can now do those things. But when you're ugly, you can't. Initially, she's super excited to go through with her procedure, but she ends up meeting someone who tells her all these things about the procedure and how she's pretty the way she is and she doesn't need plastic surgery to look beautiful and to fit into society. And there's places in the world where you can just be yourself and people will like you. So as her procedure approaches, she ends up having second thoughts, and I'm not gonna tell you anymore. I don't wanna ruin it. It's just so incredible. And the second book follows her after she gets her surgery and becomes pretty. So you get to see her be an ugly and you get to see her be a pretty and how she lives in that world. It's so good. It is so good. I was so disappointed with the last book though. I wish he would have done it a little better. I felt like he just wanted to end it, and he did. But there is going to be a movie of this book series as well coming out. Another book that I absolutely love is The 100 by Cass Morgan. There is a TV show based off of this, but it's way more dramatic than what the book is, although I've only read the first one. I think the book was 1,000 times better than the first season of the show. The show really made me mad. It was like Game of Thrones where they killed off everyone you loved. This is a dystopian novel where humanity lives on a spaceship after Earth becomes inhabitable. And it's been so many years, they believe they might be able to go back, but they don't know for sure. So they decide to send 100 delinquents down to Earth to see if it's habitable. Just imagine touching down on Earth for the first time after civilization has been entirely wiped out. It's like that. Except you start to realize, was civilization actually wiped out? Were people hiding in bunkers? The reason I enjoyed it so much is because of the age range of the people that they chose to send down to Earth. Everyone is pretty young. It's kind of like Maze Runner in a way. It's similar vibes to Maze Runner for me. I would say watch the show, but just be prepared to be pissed off the whole time. They made some of the characters in the show much more mean and evil than what they are in the books. And there's some of my favorite characters in the book. And then in the show, they're just like, why? Why'd you do that? Why? Now we're moving on to some Colleen Hoover books. I originally never read her stories because, I don't know, I read the synopsis and it just kind of seemed like a normal life thing that could happen, and it didn't really intrigue me. But I'm telling you, as normal of a story as it might seem, it's always gonna be good. I don't know how she does it, it's just always good. The first book that made it on my 5-star reads is It Ends With Us. It was the most popular, which is why I read it, and it did not disappoint. And I didn't think it was something I would enjoy reading about, but after I read it, I was like, I feel like I learned a lot from reading this novel. It Ends With Us is about a woman named Lily who ends up becoming involved with this guy named Atlas. And the relationship seems so perfect at first, but then it starts becoming abusive. Read the trigger warnings, but I will say it's kind of like, you know, when you tell a friend, oh, just leave the relationship, he doesn't treat you good. It's a lot easier said than done. That's kind of what this book takes you through. She kind of writes off certain things as being an accident, and I could see how she might think that and why she might stick around because of the way that this unfolded, which is really messed up. This is going to be a movie as well. The next book is also by Colleen Hoover, and that is All Your Perfects. This story follows Graham and Quinn. They end up meeting because their significant other is cheating with the other's significant other. So it ends up bringing them together. That scenario is what drew me in. I think if it would have started any other way, I would have never continued reading this book. But because it started that way, I was like, okay, this is either doomed from the beginning or it's going to be really good. So this story is about Quinn and Graham, who end up getting together after an awful situation. And as the years go by, they end up having problems with infertility, and that causes a lot of stress in their relationship. You hear the synopsises of her stories and you think this is just like a normal kind of problem that people go through. Why would I want to read this? But I promise you, it is just told in such a way that it's very captivating, and it's almost as if you finish the book having an understanding of something you didn't before, and you've lived through someone else's life. The next book is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. Oh my gosh, this book was so good. I cannot believe how incredible this book was. Seriously, it's one of a kind. It's immersive. The characters have so much depth. You really find yourself grappling between good and evil, right and wrong. I just was torn. I was very torn. And this is one of those books people told me to read because they said I would like it because it was DA, and I read the synopsis and I was like, how is this DA? It's totally DA. So this story is about Victor and Eli. They are super smart. They are in college together, they're best friends, and they have a theory that if you have a near-death experience that you can gain superhuman abilities. Because they have no one to actually test this for them to see if it's true, they decide to test it themselves. I don't want to ruin this story by saying too much. Forget what you think it's about, just read it. The next book is Cinder by Marissa Meyer, and this is a series. I'm reading the second one at the moment, and this is a YA dystopian novel that is a futuristic retelling of Cinderella. Don't let that stop you from reading it if you don't like retellings, because I didn't either until I read this. It's quite different from Cinderella. There's just a few major plot points from that story, and that's pretty much it. This book takes place in a world called New Beijing, where there's this deadly plague that has been released and people are dying every single day from it. So we follow Cinder, who is cyborg, and she's also the super talented mechanic in New Beijing. And although she's respected, she's looked down upon because she's a cyborg. It's just, you think it would be cool, it's not cool there. The story begins to unfold when she is tasked with fixing a droid for Prince Kai, and soon discovering that there are some secrets about her past that make her a person of value in their society. I can't really say too much. Also, I'm just a really big fan of sci-fi, and I love reading about dystopian, utopian societies, so I was a big fan. The next book was Good Girls Lie by J.T. Ellison, and look, maybe I liked this book because the author did it wrong, and I found that confusion to be endearing, and it just made me more confused, which made me like the book. I can't explain it, but I feel like that's why. So this book, I did a reading vlog on in the past, Dark Academia reading vlog on. So if you want to watch me read that book and explain everything, definitely check out that video up here, because I go into more detail about why I thought it was so good, but I'll try to summarize. I'll try. So this book is about Ash, who ends up joining this elite boarding school after her parents die. And while she's there, she ends up joining the secret society. The secret society is exactly what I would imagine it being in a realistic way. I could imagine something like this happening at a school, for real. It seemed very realistic, which is why I liked it. But there's a whole plot twist to this that literally had me thinking on this for weeks. I could not figure out the ending. I don't know if it's because it was written bad or not, which it could have been that. But because I couldn't figure out the ending and I thought of it for so long, I gave it 5 stars, which is so funny. I don't know. Also, the beginning of the book was really confusing because it didn't really tell you, it wasn't clear about what it was saying. And I think, again, that was just a mishap on the author's part, but it ended up making the book better because they didn't clarify properly. So I don't know if it was intentional or not. I don't. But if it was intentional, it was done really well. And if it wasn't, it was done bad, but it made me think it was done intentionally. I hope that makes sense. So if you like dark academia, secret societies, murder, you know what to do. You got to read it. The next book is You by Caroline Kepnes. I'm sure you knew this was coming because I've talked about this book a lot. So this book follows Joe Goldberg, who is a obsessive psychopath serial killer, and he obsesses over girls. But he does it in a way that he thinks he's protecting them, and The reason I like this book so much is because it's very rare that you get to read from the perspective of the villain. And in this series, you get to read from his perspective the entire time. It's really messed up. You get to see him try to rationalize why he does certain things and try to make it okay. And since you're in the villain's head, you also get to see how he stalks people, how he uses social media to his advantage to weave his way into someone's life. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like this series. There's also a TV show based off of this series. I'm learning now after reading the books, it is different, but the series is what got me to read the book. And I think they are both equally as good, even if they are slightly different. And the last book that made it on my list is Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey, and I just finished this one. It was on my winter reading list, and if you saw that video. This book follows Franny as she arrives to Greenland to track the last of these rare birds while they migrate to Antarctica. And it's said that they won't survive this trip, but she believes that they will. And she wants to follow them to see how they can survive, to help them in the future, to help that species stick around. She ends up convincing a crew on a fishing boat to take her to Antarctica in exchange for helping them find fish. And as you're reading through the story, it starts to reveal things from her past that got her to where she is today and why she's there. And it's almost along the lines of a Colleen Hoover novel where there's just so much depth to one character. I was very impressed with this book because I did not realize going into it, it was going to become what it became. So that is it for all of my 5-star reads of 2023. I told you it wasn't that many, but I hope you found a new book to check out based off of these books. And if you have any 5-star reads, let me know what they are, because look, if you thought it was really good, I probably will too. So let me know what they are below. I hope you guys have an amazing holiday, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and I'll see you in 2024.